In the spring of 408 BCE, the playwright Euripides left Athens, never to return. He had accepted the invitation of Archelaus, the Hellenizing king of the Macedonians, who was anxious to make his court a center of Greek culture. When the famous poet died a few months later, 3 plays were found among his papers. The Bacchae premiered posthumously at the Theater of Dionysus in 405. It won first prize and was the last of the great plays of Athenian or Attic drama. So the thing about Greek tragedy is that there are lots of different ways to approach and interpret the plays. The first important formal thing to know about Greek tragedy is that there were 3 main tragedians in 5th century Athens. We have Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Euripides is my favorite. We don't actually know the origins of Greek drama. Of course, role-playing was an important part of Greek life, but we actually have precious little information before the career of Aeschylus. Aristotle tells us that tragedy came into being from the improvising of the leaders of the dithyramb. The dithyramb was a type of cult song to Dionysus. There are instances of choral dancing attested in Homer, but we can actually see no clear development from these instances into the Attic drama as we know it. Tragedy proper was said to be founded by a certain Thespis, who won the first tragic competition at Athens in 533 BCE. The name itself, tragoidos, means literally goat song. It also more literally could mean simply that there was a goat for the prize for the victor in the tragic competitions. Every dramatic performance was part of a state or local religious festival. These festivals were central events of the religious calendar and involved the entire community. Early dramatic performances were definitely connected with the worship of the god Dionysus. Our data for the history of Attic tragedy really begins at the very end of the 6th century BCE. The practice may have formally begun in 534 when the Athenian tyrant Pisistratus founded, or at least significantly changed, the Dionysia festival. The tragedies were performed at the spring festival of Dionysus Eleutherius. At each festival, each of the 3 chosen poets produced 3 tragedies, and one example of a lighter kind of entertainment called a satyr play. The leading state official, the eponymous archon, chose which 3 poets would compete at the annual festival, and the judges of the competition were selected by lot. The choragos was a rich patron designated by the archon to provide all the equipment and training for his chorus. It was expensive, but it was an honor. The term choragos literally means chorus leader. The didaskalos, the trainer of the chorus, was also the poet, dramatist, composer, choreographer, director, and in the beginning, the principal actor of the play. This was until Sophocles ceased to act in his dramas around 460 BCE. Often, but not always, the tragedian would give his 4 tragedies a continuous theme, like the Oresteia of Aeschylus. There were 3 actors and a chorus of either 12 or 15 members. The final formal feature of Greek tragedy that I want to talk about is the basic structure. The structure or rhythm of Attic tragedy is an alternation between spoken dialogue and choral songs. The choral songs were performed with dancing and musical accompaniment. First we have the prologos, the prologue, which was a spoken scene before the entrance of the chorus. Then we have the parados, the arrival, which is the first choral song. Then we have the main narrative elements, the episodia, which were spoken scenes between songs. The choral songs were broken up into stasima, or standing songs, which were choral parts after the parados. The exodus, literally the exit, was all of the play following the last choral song. Finally, we have the komos, which was a lament, which is a lyric passage sung by both chorus and actors. Tragedy, early on, centered on suffering. First, presumably, the suffering of Dionysus, and then the heroes of Greek myth. The plots were usually based on standard myths, but each author innovated on tradition in some way or another. The most influential interpreter of Greek tragedy was the philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle wrote his famous treatise on tragedy, the Poetics, about 60 years after the death of Euripides. Aristotle is actually a very perceptive and amazing critic. For Aristotle, a play was primarily the expression of a plot. His word for plot was muthos, the representation, mimesis, of a cohesive single set of actions, praxis. Out of the 6 components of a tragedian's art, plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and melody, the plot, or the muthos, was by far the most important. The most important elements of the muthos are the reversal, or the main action changed to its opposite, and the recognition, which is a change from ignorance to knowledge. The most important elements of Aristotle's plot arise out of the structure of the plot itself. This is a formalist approach. Aristotle notes that tragedy almost always involves situations with a family member either killing or almost killing another family member. The fact that there's a dichotomy between things that are narrowly avoided and things that actually occur actually implies that there are types of tragedies, and Aristotle gives us formal types of tragedy. Just to give one example, we have the horrific act which leads to a catastrophe as seen in Aeschylus' Seven Against Thebes, Sophocles' Antigone, and Euripides' Medea. Or we have the horrific act which leads to a hopeful equilibrium, which is seen in Sophocles' Ajax and Euripides' Hercules' Forense. Aristotle held that tragic action inspired two emotions in the audience, pity and fear. Tragedy was an imitation, a mimesis, of a noble and complete action, which through pity and fear produced a purification, catharsis, of these passions. Pity was a painful emotion felt at the undeserved and serious suffering of another person. Fear was a painful emotion at the thought of impending disasters to oneself. The generation before, Plato had argued that there was no way to get rid of these negative emotions once seen or experienced in the audience. The exact hows and whys of Aristotle's catharsis has been endlessly debated by scholars. Do these emotions go through a purification or a purgation or some sort of transformation? In the end, for Aristotle, going to the theater was a positive experience. A really good resource for starting out to study Greek tragedy is actually this book right here by Albin Lesky. It's a history of Greek literature. It's actually not the most on-trend book currently. It was even not very on-trend when I was doing my PhD program, but it's an incredibly useful resource. It's got sections on every single thing you need to know about Greek literature. It's incredibly comprehensive. The Homer section is a little bit outdated. It doesn't take into account any of the oral formulaic theories of Perry and Lord, but I think that has led some people to overlook his section on Greek tragedy, which is absolutely fantastic. This book is an amazing resource for anybody starting out studying Greek tragedy. There's, of course, much more to say. Much more we can say about Lesky, which is a fantastic place to start. But that's where we're going to leave it for now, and I'll see you in the next one. See you guys later.